kids together, and I think we were really inspired by bands like Kiss and Cheap Trick, and so we wanted to do a band as well. And I think originally we had a band called Deuce, which didn't actually play any music, and I don't think had any musical instruments at the time. Eventually we decided that we needed a really hard rocking band, and I thought Charley Browne might be good because it would be the opposite of what it was. So a bit like Kiss wasn't what you thought as a hard rock name. I remember as kids, when we heard the name Kiss, we thought, oh, they must be wearing pink satin. And then it was all leather and studs and white and silver and black, and it was that, they were complete opposite of the name. And so I think that inspired it, and I think maybe I thought of the name Charley Browne as being a cartoon character, and it sounded really harmless, and that was the opposite of what we wanted to do.
The band came about like most bands, you know, kids at school getting together, playing in bedrooms initially, and then advertising for a bass player, which, because initially there was Logs and I was playing the guitar, he was playing the drums, so we didn't know anybody who actually played bass really that well, so we put an ad in, I think, the Box Hill newspaper or something like that, and several people answered, but the first guy that came along was a guy called Alex Gell, and we got Alex, and he was a great bass player. He was with us for a while. He had an 8-string bass, which I really loved because it's a very unique sound, and he was a good singer as well. So that's how it took off all the way back in 1981 through to 1987 when the band broke up. Went through many, many different lineups. And really the band went into business, and when I say that, it was actually quite unique because I would say we were the only 20-year-olds out there with a partnership agreement, a limited liability company, and I think we even had Keyman insurance on each of us at one stage as well. Certainly around the time the album came out, we were all cross-insured and everything like that. We had lawyers. We actually had the best music lawyer in Australia, a guy called Tom Stevens at the time, who'd represented everybody from AC/DC to goodness knows who. So initially we saved up enough money to do a demo, and that demo actually ended up being our first little album, which was called Battle Fatigue, and strangely enough it was all recorded on 4-track, on 2-inch tape, but 4-track tape. So it was recorded at a place I don't think even exists anymore. And then what actually happened from there is that Logs decided, as we got our first gigs and the band was really starting to kick along, that he wanted to leave the band. And Logs being Logs, he had a bigger vision in life and didn't want to play the drums anymore, and he didn't want to be into loud music anymore, and he was quite concerned about the ramifications of loud music. And being one of my best friends, I found him a pretty unique being at the best of times. So he left, and then it was sort of just Alex Gell and myself, so we had to find a drummer. The drummer we found was a guy called Maury Valesco, and Maury also, I seem to be hiring people who had great gear. Maury had great gear, and so the band actually had phenomenal gear. I had a Marshall Twin stack and a Gibson's and things like that, and we actually ended up, we had themed guitars, we had themed white flying V's for the band, and in the first film clip, which you'll see on YouTube somewhere, the band's playing with its themed white flying V's as a 3-piece with Alex, myself and Maury on drums, with his bright red pearl kit and his Charley Browne logo on the front that he's so proud of, that was sponsored I think by Sydenham Drum Clinic. So after a while, Alex sort of left the band as well. He got into a relationship, and that wasn't conducive to playing in Charley Browne. So then it was Maury and I. So you can see how these bands sort of cut and paste each other around. So inevitably it was always my band. I was the one link over the 6 or 7 years that the band went, but it had different incarnations. So Maury and I advertised this time, and we found these guys, Frank Benton, actually Frank Benton Contry, but he shortened his name like a rock star does, and Joe Tilley, who had a fantastic rock star name and didn't need to change it. And that meant I was in the band with 3 Italians, so there was 3 Italians in the band and me, which gave a pretty interesting dynamic when we didn't agree on things. So in 1985 we decided we'd do our second album, which was really going to be our signature album. We shopped the deal, and as you do when you're young musicians, you have so many weird moments. I remember going and seeing a record company somewhere in the south of Melbourne, and we played them our previous stuff, and it was this typical big fat guy, hairy, smoking a cigar, bottle of whiskey on the desk, having a shot all the time, and he just gave us the you know, that you guys will never make it, and you guys are crap, and you know, this industry's so big, and you're not good enough, and all of this sort of stuff. And at the end of that, he turned around and offered us a deal. So it was one of those things whereby everybody tries to take you down to get you at the lowest possible price. So I think what I did is I took the bottle of scotch, poured it all over his desk. If we had some matches, I probably would have lit it, and we said, no thanks, we don't need a deal from you, and see you later. So we came across this company called Opal Records, and they were great. There was an A&R chick called Fiona who really liked us. I'm not sure Frank didn't sleep with her, but hey, whatever goes at that stage. And they put a deal together which we partially funded the album, and they funded the album as well. So that enabled us to get studio time and enabled us to bring in a producer, and I was able to bring in Tony Formosa, who was a great friend of mine as well at that time, and he'd been doing a lot of stuff around Melbourne, having recently arrived from the UK, and that's how the album started.
We recorded all the backing tracks and all the instruments, the vocals, at Flagstaff Studios in Melbourne. I used to work with a guy called Ernie Rose, who's a bit of a rock and roll legend in Australia. He did the Little River Band and took them all over the States, and you know, he's a bit of a legend. He used to run the studio, so I did a nice deal to work there. The budget was sort of really small, and it was really funny listening to the tracks after such a long time. I was surprised that we really got so much out of it, really, because we weren't in the studio that many days.
There were so many highlights in Charley Browne, but mainly in the recording. We were at a studio called Flagstaff, and then we moved to Platinum Studios, which were all $1 million studios. John Farnham had just recorded there, Kate Cebriano, and a couple other big Australian acts. But one funny incident basically was when we were recording, and there was another band at the same time, and the band was called Pseudo Echo, and it was quite funny because their music is synthesizer, pop, rock, and here we are with Conan boots on, fur coats, looking the part of the heavy metal. So one genre was like really clean cut, they had hair dryers in their bags, they had hairspray, and here we are as like a heavy metal, hold your fist up sort of thing.
I just think we were young blokes that had lots of testosterone, and we just wanted to dominate, and we wrote this song that was about doing a lot of hard work but wanting people to come along and see things as we saw it, which I think is what art is all about. An artist tries to convince the rest of the world to see the world the way they see it, which is a really difficult thing. And so Rock and Roll Dictatorship, we were just trying to get people to come along with us, and we were trying to write a fairly anthem sounding song. And God knows there's been that many different iterations of that song, but I actually think it's a really good song.
The first track of the album was called Rock and Roll Dictatorship, and it's actually something I wrote the lick to it probably 3, 4, 5 years before that. Logs actually wrote the lyrics, but we wanted to start the album with something really grunty, so it went. So we figured by the time that we'd actually had that lick come in, that, you know, people would be sort of standing there going, what the hell is this? And in that particular song, by bringing in lots of other effects, we had jackboots in there and broken glass and all sorts of things. It was really a rock and roll anthem, and actually when I hear the album, I think it stands up really well today, and that track particularly.
Yeah. It's just interesting, you know. It sort of sounds very thrashy, but I think it's quite a strong song in its own right. You know, that get in line, we're all about, we're the rock and roll dictatorship. And actually, it's funny. Every time I hear it, I can just hear my voice. I don't know how much of the singer's voice is actually on there. A lot of it is me. We used some interesting instruments, like we put the drums in the toilet, and we're just doing mad drums because we wanted a specific, or I was trying to achieve a specific sound, and the only way to do it was in a really live ambient environment. And the only thing in the studio that was anything like it was the toilet, because it had tiles and stuff. It was really echoey, but people were always walking in while we were in the middle of a take. It was hilarious. Platinum was a recording studio in Chapel Street that was owned by a guy called Mac, and Mac's big claim to fame was the Joe Dolce song, "What's the matter you, hey, gotta no respect," you know, that one. Anyway, Mac owned Platinum, and we did a nice little deal there, I think, as well to Mick. Flagstaff, I worked with Steve-O Williams, which was he was one of the junior engineers at the time, and me and Steve-O were quite good mates. And we actually did quite a lot of work together before and after Charley Browne at Flagstaff. But Flagstaff was a really great studio because Mike Brady owned it, and they used to do a lot of commercials and, you know, all sorts of stuff. So you never knew who you were going to bump into. You know, I bumped into some really interesting people there. That's rock and roll, you know.
Yeah.
I was working in London one time, and Duran Duran were next door. You know, and I've worked. You know, Robert Plant has been. You know, I was at Flagstaff one time, and they introduced me to this little girl, this tiny little girl, and I said, oh, you know, they go, oh, Tony, have you met Tina? And I go, no, this is Tina Arena. And I'm like, oh, hello, how'd you do? Daryl Summers the same. I go, hello, what do you do? Because I'd only been in Australia about 3 months. I didn't even know, you know, like, hey, had never seen it. He was like,
love is in our hands, and 140, we move into the next town. Wheels spinning, leaves rubber on the ground, but I didn't notice they're after me.
Somewhere up the coast in Australia, at a hotel, probably about 500 people there, and I had a radio guitar. I had one of the first radio guitars that were around, and I was in the crowd playing, and everybody was into it, and we're all headbanging and everything like this. And then I decided I'd run back and leap over the fold back onto the stage, because it'd just be awesome in my yellow shirt and everything. And I did that, but unfortunately I didn't jump high enough, and I tripped on the foldback and took the drum kit out, and we were straight through the back of the stage with the bass player there going do 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 do, and that was the end of that for probably about 5 minutes until we got set back up.
So that was pretty much a funny thing. The other funny thing when we played to support the album was at Central Club. Basically, in those days we had what's called a sound meter, and this sound meter was plugged into a microphone, which that microphone, if it went into a red zone, basically the band stage or the power or the electronics would actually cut off. So the first band that played, I can't recall the band's name, I think it was Tokyo Rose, and they started playing, and poor guys, the band had to stop because there's no power, no electricity on stage because the red light of this signal was going too high. So I had a look at this, and my background in electronics showed me that I could unplug it and would still show the red, green and amber on the light, but nothing would go because it wasn't plugged in. So when Charley Browne played next, it was unplugged and it was going into the red. We were playing very, very loud, as a heavy metal band would, and the owner was looking at it with his fist in the air going, why in the hell is this not going off?
So the band started gigging as a four-piece, and one of the places we used to play was a regular gig at a club in Richmond in Melbourne called the Central Club. Now the Central Club had this owner, Taz, and we used to call him You Reckon, because all he'd say after you said everything was You Reckon. You say, having a good day, Taz? He'd go, You Reckon? You say, taking much money this month, Taz? He'd go, You Reckon? So he was just You Reckon to us. But the funny thing was that he always tried to cheat us as well. At those days it wasn't a lot of money, so you were basically playing and collecting door fees, so whatever you took at the door is what you got. But Taz always seemed to want one of his people at the door, and we always counted the people, and it never seemed to be quite the right number that were actually coming through the door, the same as we were getting paid for. So Joe and I and Frank, basically, we started stealing booze from the hotel to pay our bills. So we'd sort of load up our kit at the end of the day, and we'd put in a few bottles of scotch and different other. So our bars were always really well stocked, thanks to You Reckon. You know, AC/DC said it's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll, and I think we found that in our career. You know, we certainly got ripped off so many times. I can remember going to this gig, and I don't even know how we booked these gigs. And you know, we had a manager at one stage, and we managed ourselves. But this particular gig we went to was just outside of the city, and it was a pub that when we got there, basically there was a big open fireplace, and the manager goes, oh, you can just set up in front of that. And we go, well, you're going to put the fire off? And he's like, oh no, our patrons like the fire. So I was going to play in front of the fire. It's not good for my amp. So we made Maury, the drummer, set up in front of the fire. He would have fried for sure. And then in came all these people, and it looked like, the best way I could describe it is if you've ever seen the Blues Brothers and that scene where all those hicks just come into this place. And I looked at this, and we decided we'd start with a cover version because they look pretty hickish. So we decided we'd actually start with Paranoid because we knew it by Black Sabbath. We played this song, and the manager came up and complained that we were so loud. And I looked at the equipment we'd hired, and I looked at him and I said, well, it's on 1, so it doesn't really go any lower than that. So he was really upset the whole night. People seemed to really get into it. There was only about 80 people in the place, and it was packed. And at the end of the night, he refused to pay us. So I was there for an hour and a half negotiating with this guy. It just never happened. We left without the money in the end, and we were all pissed off and broke and underpaid, as AC/DC say. So what we did was that we rung a local landscaping company, and we had 2 ton of rock delivered to his front yard the next Saturday for him to landscape. Second track on the album was something called Big Business. I think it went for about 5 minutes. I mean, Joe played some phenomenal bass on it. It really was a song where the whole song was basically a bass solo, but based around a guitar riff. But the idea behind the song was we laid it on the line, and it was all about our journey in the music business and big business, all these big wankers, if you like, going, no, you can't make it. I remember going to Festival Records at the time and having a chat with them. And the guy, the A&R guy there at the time said, look, if you guys just did some cover versions of some things, that'd be fantastic. And we're like, we're not going to do cover versions for, you know, droll, boring bands. And as I think one of the bands that was in the studio with us recording in the other studio did exactly what they wanted, and they're still remembered today all around the world for that cover version that they did of a 60s song. So Big Business, it actually had a riff that was quite one of those riffs that was so popular in the 80s because it actually had I'll call it the horses racing riff. It was... So it was that style of guitar.
It was really interesting because we started off at Flagstaff, and I'd never met the band or any of the guys. I only just knew Mike, and we basically took all the instruments and the drums and everything into the studio because it was quite a good size studio floor there, and we just basically played through the songs. But my whole approach to producing the album was to try and make it coherent so that all the songs sounded like a style. And I actually, listening to it recently, I really thought we achieved that, because if you look at who wrote each song, and some of them are written by different people and in combination, and I think it's got a really strong continuity that actually surprised me.
Song on the album was the single actually off the album. Now it did chart, it got in the top 50, yay, that's exciting. You don't make too much money out of that, but hey, we were really excited to go do all the radio interviews and everything, and I remember Frank and I going along to this radio interview at the biggest station at the time in the city, which was called Eon FM. I can't remember the guy who actually did the interview now, but I remembered, I'm pretty articulate, but I remembered that he asked me the most ridiculous question that any DJ could ever ask me. And that was, what is your music augmented by? And we just looked at him like, and I think there was a silence in the studio, which is like really weird on radio. And I remember at the time, you know, we're this heavy rock band, and we actually decided we'd wear 3-piece suits to the interview, which totally blew him away. The single that we brought out was called Highway, and it had a car that started it, and then it actually went into this riff here. Then it had this really high vocal, which I'm not even sure that I could sing these days, but I'll give it a shot, which went something like this. I haven't sung that in quite a while, but it was, I noticed on the backup tracks we called the backup singers the gorillas, and probably after singing that was probably a pretty good reason to call those singers that.
I just remember so well because for me it's like an anthem. It's like your Stairway to Heaven as far as I was concerned. I just love the way it built. It starts off so slow, and then we start putting bits in, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's sort of, at the end, it's like totally crazy, and we got the maddest drums going in time with the piano, which was like pretty weird. It's not in time with the beat, it's in time with an instrument, and I thought that song really stood out.
That's right. I can remember having to write a part for that song, which I just practiced in my parents' lounge room. But then I, went to the studio, and there's a really nice piano there. It's a little bit scary. I always found playing piano in front of people a lot more difficult than playing drums. That was really good fun actually. I actually wish we'd done more of those things where we tried different instruments. We were so sort of invested in the idea of guitar, bass and drums that we sort of stymied ourselves a little bit. We probably could have tried different things.
It's got that really great harmony melody, I wondered who played the piano. I couldn't remember, but listening to it, that piano really is a great little piece. It added an extra melody to the song that I think the song was really missing. And the crazy drums, I think we could have left some of those out. Actually, I think we overdid those, but it was fun, it was a laugh. And it was something different too, which I think was great.
A lot of people ask me about the bass guitar in the song called Red Sky. Just a quick story on that. My favourite bass player at the time was Joey DeMeo from the band Man of War. He used to do a lot of bass solos, and in Australia at that time the music was pretty heavy. It was heavy metal, so we tried something a bit different, so I came up with a little bass riff at the start of Red Sky, which pretty proud of it, and it still stands at the test of time nowadays.
It was a song called Red Sky, and I enjoyed it again. It had a bass solo for the start, which gave Joe a real place on the album, and something that I think that he'd really be remembered for, and certainly with his kids and that, because he just played it beautifully, and it was a one take, I think, if I remember as well. Then it came out of the bass solo and went into... So the lick was pretty heavy, and at the end of the song we had this thing with the drums that just basically the guitar just went, and then we do something with bass or lead or something like that over there, and that was basically the timing between doing just this basic thing to finish the song, and then all this weird stuff that was just done over it.
Oh wow, Exit Stage Right, what's that all about? And now it's time to exit stage right. Yeah.
The time has come.
Spring reverb? Yeah. And it was in some kind of a box, and we belted it, and it gave it that, sort of sound, I think. But yeah, it was full of all interesting things at the start. Often 24 tracks were not enough. I think we did some bouncing with the drums, particularly. I think we bounced them down to a stereo, a left and right pair, to give us enough tracks for the guitar, because we needed loads of tracks for the guitar, didn't we, Mike?
The most experimental track on the album was probably the last track. It was a song called Exit Stage Right. Actually, if I remember rightly, we named it that because they used to have a cartoon at the time with this little guy that used to go, exit stage left, and like run off to the left of the stage. So we thought, why not call the song Exit Stage Right? And we'll run off to the right of the stage, which is how we always left the stage, always to the right after leaving the Exit Stage Right song, which is always the last song of the performance. And essentially it just had a guitar lick that was at the front really slow and just went... So that sound was playing, and then we'd have echoes going over there. I slammed the piano in the studio with a big reverb on there. We were throwing rubbish cans at the toilet wall. We had Patra orange juice bottles in there, and anything we could find that would make this really weird, unusual sound, screaming at the back of the studio. I slammed the amp shut and different things like that. And then from there the song breaks into something that picks up that lick again, but something that's much more powerful into... So always our songs were really guitar based, and from my part, that made them very, very interesting songs to play.
At the time, I was working, started a business with a couple of friends. One was the guy who'd done the costume design, that was Alistair. And there was another guy we were working with, he was a really talented artist called Phil Barlow. And the guys in Charley Browne had done this album, and now they wanted a really good cover. And I think we're a little bit inspired by the look of the film Dune, which had come out, and we wanted to do something in that vein, and we wanted a little, I reckon it had a little bit of an S&M look to it. And so Phil did some preliminary sketches and ran them under your nose and said, we can do this, we can do that. But it was basically, I think it was a cross between S&M and Dune. And, you know, the thing was called Power Palace, so we tried to make this sort of leathery palace with floating characters and sort of tortured looking faces. And then for the back cover, I think we basically took photocopies of the members of the band and then literally just coloured them in and treated them. These days in computers it would be so much easier, but back then we had to do it using natural media. And so we did an album covered sized piece of artwork and did a background and then put the drawings on that background and put the photocopies on, and I think we hand lettered all the text afterwards, and basically that's how the Power Palace cover happened.
Then for the album, you may not be able to see this, I'll just hold that up to the camera for a second. That's what's called a track sheet. And what it is, I'll just explain it to you, is you've got the track here. This is actually the track for Rock and Roll Dictatorship, going down here. And then as you'll see, there's 24 tracks because it was a 24 track studio that we recorded in. And if I look down here, I'll see that track 1 was the bass drum, track 2 the snare, 3 and 4 the toms, 5 and 6 the overheads for the cymbals on the drum kit. 7, I think you'll love number 7 if you can get that one in there. 7 right with that round circle. There it is, coming into view. Says bin. The reason why is because that was actually the rubbish bin that we mic'd up in the toilets of the studio that got played and is actually in the track. Then we've got Broken Glass, that's in there as well. Track 9 is the bass, 9 and 10 are the bass, 11 and 12 are tom-toms, 14's the rhythm guitar, 15's the solo, 16's another solo, 17's another rhythm guitar, 18 and 19 are the vocals, and then the gorillas are 20, 21 and 22, and then we've got the marching, the BFX marching, which is a sample. These days we call them a sample. Then we found it on an old record that was lying around in the studio, which is a marching track that actually goes on that. So that's how we put those together. Now I've just got to put the guitar down for a second, and I'm going to show you this. For those of you that are kids here, this is what you used to record on back in the day. This is 2-inch tape, and this 2-inch tape, if I open it up, that's what it looks like there. It literally is bloody heavy. Literally is 2 inches wide. And on this tape are the first 4 songs with those 24 tracks. And the tracks go across the tape, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, etc., 12, across the track, across the tape like that. And that is actually still live and in pretty good condition, the very first tape for the Charley Browne album.
Costume design for Charley Browne, at that time we were trying to get some sort of look, and we didn't want to just turn up in jeans and t-shirts. We wanted to actually look different. And a friend of mine that I'd studied graphic design with was an exceptionally good draftsman and quite imaginative, and he came up with a design that was both, we thought looked good and it was affordable. And so it was basically tights and a different colour top for each member of the band, and I had black stripes on it, a bit like an Eddie Van Halen guitar, and then there was this wearable shield which was sort of dumb looking. But you know, everybody had to wear the thing, and it was an idea just if we could have a colour for each person, a bit like the Wiggles actually, a colour for each person, and just look like we'd made some effort to dress up.
But just like all bands of the era, we had some pretty unusual clothing. And as I knew we were going to do this documentary, I decided to dig through some of the clothing that I had and see if I could find it. And lo and behold, I found it. Now, our camera crew hasn't seen this, but this was my circa 1985 ball pouch that used to wrap around down below here, and this would hang in front. Now, yes, I did wear something underneath it, girls, but this was actually, I think Loebs and his mother made all of these things here. The idea was to be somewhat, you know, unique and different. Here was actually my stage shirt, and yeah, it was yellow with this pattern on it, which looks like the number 4. Now, the strange thing for me looking back at this is the size of this is about 3 sizes smaller than I am now. I've put on so much muscle since then. So there we have the stage shirt. I couldn't find the tights. Now with these there were black tights that went with it, but there were also these pretty cool yellow leg warmers, right, that would go over, and I had red boots that would go underneath the yellow leg warmers, and on each of our shoulders we wore these armour, right, so we had this armour design. So it's sort of this very, very interesting, weird sort of look that, you know, you ask your mum to stitch up this stuff and they're like, what the hell are you doing? Well, we're playing a rock band. And then just going through the archives also, these were the Charley Browne t-shirts that we had caricatured there. This is an incarnation of Charley Browne actually after the album. There's Frank and Joe, Maury on drums. I'm right here. You can see I had some hair then. And Joe actually stopped. Oh, where's Joe? He actually stopped playing bass after the album and shifted to the other guitar. So we had twin lead guitars because we actually did a lot of twin lead guitar stuff on the album. So we brought in a guy called Pete Bizos to play bass. He's a great bass player, very influenced by Deep Purple, and that's Pete there. And then on the back you've got tour dates and all that sort of thing.
I taught myself basically by playing on the couch with 2 sticks. They weren't drumsticks, I know that, I can't remember what they were. One was serrated and one was straight, and I used to just play along to records on the couch, which is actually not a bad way of learning the drums. The problem with us is we rehearse too much. We should have played places more often. I remember going to this place and walking along and going, the floor felt like it was made from Velcro. It was sticking to my shoes and I couldn't work out why the carpet was sticking to my shoes. And then I looked down and had a good look, and it was just full of dried beer and vomit and anything you could think of, and the floor was sticky. You just walked across sticky carpet. And so we kept on trying to get on stage and they kept on holding us back. There were other bands playing, and eventually we got on. And I think at that time it wasn't enjoying it so much as getting through it the first time. I think that was one of the things, is just getting through the set and getting it done and not making mistakes. I think when you're young, you focus too much on don't make a mistake, and it really doesn't actually matter that much. And I think bands that have gone a long time, they realise it doesn't matter if they make a mistake on stage. No one really cares. And so I was really focused on not making mistakes. And so it was almost a relief when we came to the end that we'd done it, and it had gone down pretty well.
So what happened to Charley Browne? Where did it go to? I think our last gig was in the middle of 1987, which was 2007, 1987, and at that stage we were just starting to argue, and I think this is what happens with a lot of bands. You brought out the album came out in 1985-86, and so we'd done a year promoting the album and doing some touring and promoting it, but we hadn't really got to the next level. We were writing more songs, but it was more of the same. We were looking at our image. We'd got out of the outfits by that stage. We were wearing more street clothes and t-shirts and stuff like that, but it just wasn't happening. So I'm not sure who pulled the pin, but I know it must have been me in some respects, because I just would have recreated the band if I wanted to go on. But at that stage I'd probably just had enough of trying to do it all myself, and I ended up joining a band where I didn't have to do much but play guitar and write some songs, so that was good. But it definitely was a very sad few months after that, because these guys become your family, and you hang out with them a lot and create a lot of jokes and a lot of laughter, and so when all that sort of dries up, I guess you got to look at the next thing in your life.
Oh, my favourite song. Oh, I have to look at it and think. I've probably got two. I'd probably say Red Sky and She Would Never Love Me. Although I like Tear Out My Heart as well. I think they're all really three strong songs. Yeah, definitely those three.
A lot of our friends came to see us. It would have been good to get out and expose ourselves to more people, because we used to go to parties and put on Charley Browne tapes. Whatever was playing at the party, we used to just turn the music off and put our tapes on. And people would always go, "Gee, what's this? This is really good." And so people actually had a really positive reaction to the band, but the band probably didn't expose itself enough.
So what I'd say to anybody sort of watching this doco and going, who are these guys? We've never heard of them. Of course you've never heard of us. You've never heard of us because if you actually do Google us, you'll find that Charley Browne is one of the rarest heavy metal hard rock bands of the 1980s, and one of the hardest ones to find. And the reason why is because we only made a certain number of albums, and they've been sold for up to 360 euros on eBay, which is phenomenal. But of recent years, little fan sites have been popping up here and there all over the world. So they come and they go, and we get letters and emails from them saying, when are you guys going to do something? Most bands are coming back. Well, I'm here to tell you folks that over the next little while after this documentary comes out, we will be putting together a new track with some of the members of the old band.
I thought the bass playing was really strong, and I'm a bass player, so yeah, I thought it was really great. He's a bit like a lead guitarist in some respects, isn't he?
All my fans out there, look, all I can say is enjoy the album. Please pay up or you die. Nah, I'm only joking. Enjoy the album. It's 30 years old. It still stands a test of time, and it was really, really good playing on it. With Mike Handcock and Frank and Murray and all the other boys that helped us with there, Tony Famosa and a couple other guys. It was just fantastic playing, and enjoy the album and heavy metal rule.
Well, I think Charley Browne time was a really good time, and the reason it was such a good time actually is because I think you're a very original songwriter, and to this day I hear those songs and go, you know what, I don't actually hear songs like that, and I think those songs should probably be preserved and put out there, not for someone to find.
There were a lot of interesting instruments and pieces of equipment at the studio, and that was just one of them. And honestly, we tried virtually everything. We tried to pull every cat out of every bag that we could find lying in any corner. And I think we did, actually. I think we did. It's made the album what it is, I think.
One of the things that blows me away personally, as we record this all those years later, and no, I haven't aged a bit, I know that, hey, is the fact that now, because of technology, the band survived. The band survived 1987, and it's now got fans all around the world in places like Cyprus and in Argentina and in Germany and in the Netherlands and these sort of places. And you know, I guess I want to thank you guys for checking us out, watching our YouTubes, sending the occasional email, putting things on our fan site and on our Facebook page as well. You know, it's awesome. It's awesome to think that as a songwriter, your music survives you, and as you get older, your songs start to appeal to a different audience, or they mean something to other people, because that's why you write songs. Songs change lives. Every single person watching this can remember a song that was there when their life changed, and when they hear it, they remember that moment. And the beautiful thing as a songwriter is you never know whether it's one of your songs and which song it is.
Did I?
Yep.
I can't remember that.
I actually don't remember it.
That's awesome.